Yo, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I am back with another video today. We're going to be reacting to something interesting, something that I stumbled across my YouTube recommendations, and it is called The Most Disturbing Depiction of the Afterlife I Ever Read. And it's about a book called Feed the Pig. And I thought, oh, it's probably about Animal Farm, right? Because I read Animal Farm and it was about, I don't want to get into that. So this is a totally different book, and the title is what got me on to click on this video. So let's check it out.
Hello everyone, and welcome back. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about the afterlife. I don't know why. I'm in good health, as far as I can tell at least. But for whatever reason, it's been on my mind a lot recently about what happens to us after we die. But being an avid horror fan, there are tons and tons of horrifying depictions of the afterlife that only make my fears and concerns about this much, much worse. And among the more disturbing of the ones I'm aware of has to be the subject of today's video, the story, Feed the Pig. Now before we begin discussing this story, there are two things I want to point out. First and foremost, this story deals with some seriously heavy themes such as depression, torture, just about any imagery you'd see in a Hellraiser film, and primarily, the taking of one's own life. This story is, of course, a fictional creepypasta, but these are unfortunately very real issues that many deal with. If anyone is struggling with these, please seek help. I promise the world is a better place with you in it. And the second thing I want to address before diving in is that there won't really be much to see on this video, as is the case with my usual sort of book report summaries of creepypastas like today's is going to be. I am trying to work on something to make these videos a bit more engaging visually for another video I'm working on, but unfortunately it just wasn't in the budget for this one, so just know I'm trying. So this will be a good video to have on in the background if you're doing homework, cleaning your room, doing the dishes. Just something for you to listen to while you knock out other
I'm actually reacting.
far more important tasks.
You're good, bro.
So with those discretions out of the way, let's dive in to Feed the Pig.
Alright, before we get into it, if you guys are struggling, you guys are depressed, you can just call 988. You're not alone, and this book is fictional, but there are people struggling, so just call 988 and you get the help you need. You're better in this place. You have value and purpose in this life. Don't let others tell you otherwise, alright?
The story begins with a man waking up tied to a metal chair in a dark, grimy, concrete room. He would feel that his throat was sore and that he was seriously dehydrated as he began to look around the room. It was completely empty, save for the chair that he was tied in and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Besides this, it was dark, but he could see that there was a hallway that led out of the room. Now he couldn't see into this hallway, but he could hear sounds coming from it. Notably, the sounds of screaming, which only added to his fear. He tried to remember how he had gotten to this place, what had brought him here, but for the life of him, he couldn't remember anything. He yelled out, asking if anyone was there, if anyone could help him, but no one responded, as the sounds of screaming from the hallway only continued. He would struggle with his restraints trying to free himself, but the ropes that bound him to the chair were tied too tight. He was stuck until someone came to get him. But then he heard a sound from the hallway, one that wasn't screams, and a sound that was getting closer and closer to his door. They were footsteps, but they weren't these loud booming footsteps, but instead the pitter-patter of children's feet. A child running quickly into the room in excitement. The young boy entered the room. He was dressed in a red onesie and a red devil's mask. And through the eye holes of the mask, the man in the chair could tell that these kids' eyes were bulging, sticking out of his sockets like large fish eyes. The man began pleading with the child to free him, but the child would just say, "You did a bad thing." The man would insist that he didn't do anything, but the child would only reaffirm this, saying he did a really, really bad thing. He would shake his head in protest, saying that whatever he did, he was sorry, but he couldn't remember. He couldn't remember anything and just pleaded with the boy to please set him free. But as he pleaded with the boy, a large man in overalls with an angry expression on his face burst into the room, and he could see in his hands was a sawed-off shotgun. He would shove the child against the wall before pointing the gun at him and pulling the trigger. The man in the chair would scream out in horror at the sight that just transpired in front of him, as the man in the overalls would grab the body, sling it over his shoulder, and walk out of the room. And as he left, a chorus of laughter could be heard coming from the hallway. The laughter would fade after several minutes, and just as the man thought he was alone again in the room, he would hear a voice call out to him. Another man was in the room with him now, one in jeans and a white button-up shirt. He looked to be younger, in his early 30s maybe, but his eyes looked as though they were lifeless, and his mouth seemed to be in a perpetual frown. He would look at the man in the chair and cross his arms, saying that he must be the new one, and that he was disgusted by him. He could tell that the man in the chairs had already seen the horrors of this place, and in comparison, where he came from had to look a lot better than here. But the man in the chair again would say that he's sorry for whatever he did, that he didn't mean to upset him or the people here, but that he couldn't remember what he had done. But he would be told he hadn't done anything to anyone here. It was what he had done to himself. He was reminded that one day, after his wife left for work, he would bring a rope to the woodshed and end his own life. The man in the chair was dead by his own hand, and this place that he found himself in was his punishment. The memory of doing so came back painfully as he could remember everything now. He had lost his job recently and didn't have enough in savings, meaning he would be homeless soon. His wife hated him for this and threatened to leave him, and to make matters worse, she had started seeing someone new.
No. No, don't do that. No. Hey, when you're in a relationship, somebody's like struggling, you gotta be there for them. Oh man, she a fake, she a phony, she a blasphemous bitch. And she cheated on him too. Oh man. It's only getting worse from here.
Threatened to leave him, and to make matters worse, she had started seeing someone new. The man was humiliated and ashamed, and thought of the worst possible way to try and run from his problems. The man in the white shirt would introduce himself as Danny, and say that he was the number 2 person in charge of this place. And before they began, he would answer one question for the man in the chair. And he asked the only question that he felt mattered. Is this hell? Danny would laugh and explain, no, it's not hell. But it certainly isn't heaven either. This was a place called the Black Farm. Danny would explain that this was a place where God created for those who took their own lives. There were good people who did so, and they shouldn't be punished forever in hell because of one mistake in a moment of weakness. And yet, they still committed a sin, meaning they couldn't be welcomed into heaven. And so he made the Black Farm instead. Only over time, things went wrong. God would lose control of this place, and would put something called the pig in charge. But after putting the pig in charge, God either forgot about this place, or quit caring about it altogether. The pig became corrupt with power, and the Black Farm, a place that once served as a peaceful afterlife for those who had ended their lives prematurely, was now the torturous nightmare that we see it today, full of creatures that the pig made in its bastardized attempt to create its own force of life. These are the monsters that we see inhabiting this place, the ones that come into the room and torture the man, such as the boy, such as the man in the overalls. These aren't real people, but beings, monsters of the pig's creation. The man in the chair felt like this had to be a bad dream, one that he would surely wake up from at any moment. He couldn't spend his eternity suffering in a nightmare that God forgot, a place of monsters and torture under the control of something called the pig. But he wouldn't wake up. Danny would continue, saying that the Black Farm didn't have to be where Danny spent his eternity. He had one option to get out of this place, one and only one. He could feed the pig. The man asked what this meant. Danny would explain that if the man decided to feed the pig, there was a chance that he could be returned back to his old life. It was only a chance though. If he fed the pig and wasn't returned back to his old life, then he would end up in hell. It was a 50-50 shot. Go back home or burn in hell.
Coin toss.
But those were if he decided to feed the pig. He could always decide not to and stay here in the Black Farm. Sure, it was a brutal, painful landscape, but Danny promised that even as impossible as it seemed from the sounds coming at the end of that hallway and what awaited the man if he decided to stay here, that hell would be worse, even if not by much, it would be worse than here. The man would hear another scream from the hallway, this one belonging to a woman, and would look to Danny and say that he wants to feed the pig. But Danny would say this isn't a decision to be made lightly, that he would leave the man with some time to think about it, and he'd be back a while when the man has come to his decision. And Danny left, leaving the man alone, and the man would break down and cry as he heard the sound of the woman screaming in the hallway for hours on end. From his exhaustion and pain and confusion of the whole situation, he would find himself dozing in and out of consciousness, beginning to doze off at the morbid lullaby of the sounds of agony and pain from the hallway. And he was in such a haze that he failed to notice that from the hallway, something had slithered into the room with him. That is, until he felt a sharp pain on his big toe. He yelped as he tried to pull himself away from whatever had hurt his foot, but he couldn't due to the restraints that bound him to the chair. He looked down and screamed as he saw what had harmed him. It was an armless man, whose legs were bound together with barbed wire, which forced him to inch around the floor like a worm. His head was bald, covered in scabs, and his eyelids were gone, making his eyes these bloodshot, white orbs. Then the man in the chair saw what had caused his pain. The bald man on the ground had had his teeth removed, and they were replaced with old rusty screws that he had used to bite the man's foot. He had a chain around his neck, which led to the doorway. Holding the other end of the chain leash was another man, this one standing in the doorway. He was tall, fat, and naked. He too was covered in scabs from head to toe. He wore a red sack over his head which only had one eye hole crudely cut out, and through that opening for his vision, he was staring at the man in the chair intently. However, he would notice that this massive figure in the doorway was also using a certain male appendage while staring at him. While that's going on, the one on the ground would again bite at the man, causing him to bring his foot down to the best of his ability with the restraints and kick down on the guy on the ground, which caused him to scream out in pain as his head bounced off the floor. This too only seemed to excite the handler, and this act of pain would make the handler enjoy the sight so much that a mist of black ants would shoot out of his appendage, and after doing so, he would take his pet and leave, once again leaving the man alone. Seeing the ants that had shot out of this man crawl around on the floor.
Ew. Is he talking about where you pee from? Ew.
Made him nauseous, and the man in the chair would throw up onto himself, unable to move anywhere to have done so. I promise that's the grossest part of the story. He would scream for someone to come help him, that he didn't belong here. But after a while, someone new would enter the room. As he heard the footsteps coming down the hallway and getting closer to his room, he braced himself for what nightmare was about to walk through the door and torture him further. But instead, a woman walked in. She was missing an eye, her skin was a sickly pale, and she was covered in rags. All things considered, though, she didn't seem as nightmarish as the other things that had come into his room so far. She didn't seem to walk in with ill intent either. Instead, she would ask him if he was still considering if he wanted to feed the pig or not. He would say that he was still considering it before asking what she wanted. She would say that she was once, long ago, sitting right where he was, deciding if she wanted to feed the pig or stay here in the black farm. And she chose to stay, to not feed the pig, and she has been here ever since. The man would ask what was out there, gesturing to the hallway and the sounds of wailing and agony that came from within it. And she would say she couldn't even begin to describe it. She said that they had always told her that hell was worse, but she wasn't sure if she believed it. And if it was, it couldn't be much worse than this place already was. Here, people are tortured in every conceivable way. And if he chose to stay, he would be one of them, being tortured for all eternity. That is, unless he fed the pig. She said that when she made her decision not to, she was too much of a coward to risk things getting even worse than this place was. Yes, there was the chance that she could go back to her life, but she was too scared to end up in hell and see if it was even worse. The man would ask what feeding the pig meant, what would happen if he decided he wanted to. And she would say that he would have to see for himself. She would advise him to think hard though, as sometimes suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity. He would cry out and ask what he should do. And she would tell him, in a whisper, "Feed the pig." And at those words, she too would leave. Left alone again, he began to wonder what he should do, really thinking about it and weighing his options this time. He hadn't wanted this, he just wanted to escape from his problems. He'd made a mistake, and the Black Farm was worse than he thought any afterlife could be. He would give anything to go back to his life. But what if he wasn't sent back? What if he was sent to hell? Could it really be worse than here? It seemed impossible, but from what everyone told him, it had to have been. But ultimately he decided that living here in regret for all eternity, wondering if he should have fed the pig or not, would be worse than ending up in hell. The punishments and the torture would be more severe there, but he would know that he had tried everything he possibly could to get back to his own life. He called for Danny, telling him that he had made his decision. A few seconds later, he would hear footsteps coming down the hallway, and Danny would again enter the room. He told him his choice, and Danny would sarcastically say that he must have thought long and hard about it. However, the man in the chair would say that if Danny was in his position, he would have done the same thing. But Danny would say that he had been in his place before, and that he had chosen differently. Danny would put a cloth over the man's eyes, blinding him. He would cut the rope, freeing the man from the chair that he had been confined to for hours. Danny would instruct the man to keep the blindfold on and follow him, so the man would put his hand on Danny's shoulder and follow him out of the room and into the hallway. And as they walked through the hallway, that the man had heard the sounds of screaming and crying echoing into his room from within. He would hear new sounds, one that the walls had blocked him from hearing before, the sounds of metal clanging, of meat ripping, and his mind raced to imagine what horrors were in this hallway that he couldn't see as a result of his blindfold. And he heard something moving from behind him, getting closer as he followed Danny. He felt hot breath against his neck, and the sound of a tongue licking his lips from just next to his ear. Whatever it was that was so close, it taunted him, saying that he was going to feed the pig, that he would be a great meal for the hungry piggy. It would laugh in an impossibly deep voice before backing off, and Danny was quiet the whole time. As they walked, the man went from hot to cold to shivering as though he was walking through different climates in an instant. And he went from that freezing cold to finally a blazing heat and a thick humidity. His feet felt like he was walking on warm iron now. It sounded like he was walking through a factory. He could hear machines whirring, flames blazing. He could taste dirt and smell ash in the air. He and Danny came to a halt. In front of them by some distance, he could hear chains rattling, hear something snort, before a deafening wail of a pig squealing erupted. It sounded absolutely massive. Danny would announce that he had brought another one who wanted to feed the pig. There was a pause before Danny would speak again, saying, "If that is what you wish," as though he was answering some unspoken command of the surely gargantuan beast in front of them.
Man, I got chills. Holy shit.
Danny walked behind the man and pushed him forward, telling him to approach the pig. He did as instructed. Though unable to see, he reached out blindly before him, and he felt tears running down his eyes as he got closer to this thing. He pleaded for Danny to take off the blindfold so that he could see what he was walking towards, but Danny would assure him that he didn't want to see any of this. As he walked, a repugnant smell hit his nose, causing him to gag as he smelled the massive living flesh that he could not see before him. He vomited into the cloth that covered his face, sobbing as he did so, but Danny just kept pushing him forward. Directly in front of him now, another deafening squeal erupted from the massive pig's mouth, its hot breath blowing against the man's whole body. With an outstretched hand, he felt the pig's snout. He wanted to recoil, but Danny forced his hand back onto the beast. The pig was bigger than he had thought. It had to weigh over a ton. Gigantic didn't even begin to describe it. And he could feel as it opened its mouth. He reached his hand inside and could feel teeth the size of kitchen knives into the cavernous opening that was this thing's mouth. Danny would command him to feed the pig, that he had made his choice and now he had to live with it. He was either going to go home or go to hell. There was only one way to find out. Danny instructed him to climb inside the pig's mouth.
What?
The man trembled as he realized what feed the pig had meant. He had to feed himself to this thing. He would begin to protest, but Danny would tell him to climb inside and not to quit moving forward until the pig was done with him. The man pleaded and begged, saying that there had to be another way, but Danny would tell him to go. He couldn't do this. He couldn't actually feed himself to this thing. But the words of the woman that he had met earlier ran through his mind. Suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity.
Yep.
And she was right. He sent up a silent prayer, begging for mercy, before beginning to climb inside the mouth of the pig. Its hot breath washed over him as he grabbed a tooth and pulled himself forward until he was inside the mouth of the pig. His head, arms, and torso landing on the spongy tongue of the beast. He reached for another tooth and pulled himself in further. It was so hot, so humid that he almost passed out, but he knew he had to keep going. Saliva and mucus covered him as he pulled himself deeper, getting his legs and feet past the lips of the pig. Fully in its mouth, he reached for another tooth to pull himself forward as he began to cry. And that's when the pig began to chew. Its teeth ripped through his flesh and bones, crunching and tearing at him. He cried out in agony as he reached forward to pull what was left of himself further, doing so as the pig bit down for another bite. He felt and heard his bones pop, his muscles tear. His body was being ripped apart. The pain was unimaginable, but he just kept crawling. He cried for it all to stop as he grabbed another tooth and pulled forward. He could feel a shift in pressure as he realized he was nearing the end of its mouth. He forced himself to continue. He was almost there. Just as he was about to let darkness overtake him, as the pig bit down again, this time ripping his insides and organs apart, he pulled himself forward one last time and felt his body drop as he began to fall down the pig's throat. The heat was intense as he fell, and he screamed as he fell down the seemingly infinite drop. But his eyes would open, and he would realize that he could see again, just before he hit the ground with a painful thud. But where he was expecting to see the insides of the pig, he instead looked up and saw the ceiling of his shed. His throat burnt, and he was thirsty. But he would look up and see, hanging from the ceiling, was a rope that had snapped. He was alive, and he began to sob on the floor of the woodshed. He was thankful that he had been spared, and promised not to waste the second chance at life. He would promise to devote his life to those in need. He didn't want anyone else to ever have to feed the pig. And that, everyone, was Feed the Pig. I really liked the story. I thought it was a really dark and twisted look at the afterlife. I know this story covered some seriously heavy issues, and again, if you or anyone you know is struggling with that, please reach out for help. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes people just need help seeing that. So, again, everyone, look out for one another. Be kind to yourselves and others. Discussing the story again, though, I know it was a little gross, very disturbing, very dark. But, like I said, for whatever reason, I've been thinking about the afterlife a lot recently, if, there is one, what it would entail and whatnot. So much so that I keep dying in my dreams, like, violently. I should probably talk to someone about that. That's probably why the afterlife is on my mind so much, is because I'm not surviving my dreams. I'm really hoping that's not a bad omen. But because of that, I wanted to talk about this story today. So I want to thank you all very, very much for watching. I also want to thank you guys for the support on White Stag Education. I'm glad to see so many.
Hey, that is, oh my gosh. This was an amazing video. Well, the contents of it is bad and disturbing. Oh my gosh. I thought he would just go down to hell and just suffer more, but fortunately it had a good ending. Oh my goodness. But that's so true. The woman said is to suffer now instead of suffering forever. You have to face your fears and suffer now rather than suffering for eternity. That is so important. It's like you have a fear of something, right? You have, whether it be a fear of spiders, whether a fear of heights, whether of this. It's okay to feel that fear, but don't let that judge you. So you can conquer any fear that you would like, but it's all mental. all of the things that we fear is through learned behavior. We see people fear this. But if we can take a good look at ourselves and reflect, I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to be scared. Just tell yourself that. Look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that, and you would not be scared. The reason why we're scared is because we choose to be scared. But if we choose not to be scared, we're able to do so much great things and amazing things. But yeah, that's all for this video. I'm gonna end it off. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I was so shocked. I was so shocked of what just happened. Like the whole descriptive details and all of the things that he just said. It creates that illustration. It creates that illustrative image just in your head, and you're like, oh my god, oh man, that is, oh my gosh. Imagine if they made a movie about this. I don't think anyone can watch it unless you're like a really like horror fan. You can bear, like, your stomach can bear through all that. But like, dang, bro. But yeah, that's all for this video. I gotta get going. So yeah, hopefully everyone take care of themselves, stay safe, have an amazing week. I'll see you guys later.